The Miracle of the Multiplication of Bread by Saint Andrea Avellino, 1521 to 1608, examined the documented story where the saint distributed bread to the poor, and the bread not only didn't run out, but multiplied abundantly, echoing the biblical miracle. Part 1. The Cry of Scarcity and the Call to Compassion. What happens when the cupboard is bare, the pantry echoes, and the faces looking to you for help outnumber the crusts of bread you have left? That gnawing fear of not enough. It paralyzes, doesn't it? You've felt it, perhaps staring at a dwindling bank statement, an empty fridge before payday, or the sheer scale of need surrounding you, making your own resources feel laughably small. That crushing weight of scarcity, the terror of reaching the bottom, the dread of disappointing those who depend on you. It's a universal human ache, but perhaps it resonates with a sharper edge later in life, when resources feel more finite, energy wanes, and the world's needs seem only to grow. It feels like hitting a wall, a dead end where logic screams surrender. But what if I told you the very moment you feel most empty, most inadequate, is precisely where God often sets the stage for his most shocking provision? What if the miracle doesn't come despite your lack, but because of it, when offered in radical, trembling trust? That's the hidden, powerful truth echoing through the centuries from the life of Saint Andrea Avellino, a miracle that whispers directly into our own anxieties about having enough, being enough, doing enough. Picture Naples in the late 1500s, not the romantic city of postcards, but a place where poverty gripped whole neighborhoods, where hunger was a constant, gnawing companion for countless souls. Into this landscape walked Andrea Avellino, a priest whose heart burned with a fire far hotter than the Italian sun, a fire of pure, self-sacrificing love for Christ and the least of his brethren. He wasn't a distant administrator. He was in the gutters, the hovels, face to face with desperation. His life wasn't about comfort or security. It was poured out, like the widow's mite, Mark 12 verses 41 to 44, given completely, trusting God for the return. And the need, it was overwhelming. Day after day, lines of the poor, the sick, the abandoned would form, their hollow eyes fixed on him, their empty hands outstretched. His resources, always seemingly inadequate, he relied entirely on alms, on the generosity of others, which ebbed and flowed like the tide. There were days, many days, when the number of hungry mouths far exceeded the meager loaves available. The pressure was immense, the temptation to turn people away, to ration harshly, to prioritize the deserving poor, must have been a constant whisper. Yet Andrea's response was rooted in something deeper than human calculation, an unshakable faith in the God who sees, the God who provides, the God who multiplied 5 loaves and 2 fish for thousands, Matthew 14 verses 13 to 21. He understood the terrifying, beautiful call of Matthew 25 verse 35. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. For Andrea, every hungry person was Christ, hidden in distressing disguise. So he gave, not just when it was easy, not just from surplus, but precisely when logic dictated holding back. He gave the little he had, trusting that the command to love carried with it an unspoken promise of provision. He didn't wait for a signed guarantee from heaven. He acted on the conviction that obedience precedes the miracle. This is the first, crucial point. Miracle often germinates in the soil of radical compassion fueled by audacious faith. It starts not with abundance, but with the willingness to offer the little you possess, however insignificant it seems, into the hands of God for the sake of others. It's the widow of Zarephath using her last handful of flour and drops of oil to make bread for Elijah first, 1 Kings 17 verses 7 to 16. It's looking scarcity in the face and choosing generosity anyway, believing Philippians 4 verse 19. And my God will supply every need of yours according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus. For Andrea, the poor weren't a problem to be managed. They were the sacred vessel through which God's grace would flow, both to them and through them, back to him and the community. His compassion wasn't pity. It was active, costly identification. He entered their hunger, their desperation, not as a benefactor from on high, but as a brother in need of God's mercy himself. This profound humility, this recognition that we are all beggars before God, fueled his tireless giving. He knew the truth of Proverbs 19 verse 17. Whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his deed. The repayment, however, often comes in currencies far exceeding mere bread, in spiritual riches, in divine encounter, in the multiplication of grace. Which brings us to the shocking moment when the laws of nature bent before the greater law of divine love. Part 2. The breaking point and the unfolding mystery. Imagine the scene. The line seems endless. Faces gaunt, eyes pleading. Andrea and his helpers have been distributing what bread they have, but the baskets are visibly emptying. The fear is palpable, not just among the poor, sensing the end is near, but perhaps even among those serving, realizing the math simply doesn't work. How many more can they feed? 5, 10. But there are dozens, maybe hundreds, still waiting. This is the breaking point. This is where human effort meets its absolute limit. This is the moment where faith is either proven hollow or revealed as the most potent force in the universe. Andrea didn't stop. He didn't announce a shortage. He didn't send anyone away. He kept reaching into the baskets. He kept breaking the bread. He kept distributing. This is the second vital point. The miracle unfolds in the act of obedient giving, not before. It demands stepping off the cliff of human reason while you're still terrified of the fall. It's Peter stepping out of the boat onto the raging sea before the water solidifies under his feet. Matthew 14 verses 28 to 29. Andrea didn't pray for the bread to multiply first and then distribute it. He distributed the insufficient supply in faith, and the multiplication happened as he gave. The miracle was dynamic, occurring in the very motion of compassion. Witnesses reported it happening subtly at first, then undeniably. The loaves, broken and given, seemed to replenish. The baskets, moments ago scraping the bottom, were found to still contain bread. Not just a little, but abundantly. As hands reached in, more appeared. It wasn't a sudden, magical duplication in a back room. It was a continuous, flowing multiplication happening as the need was met. The bread kept coming. It didn't run out. It defied every expectation, every natural law. The meager supply stretched and stretched and stretched, not to barely cover the need, but to satisfy it abundantly, with leftovers gathered afterwards, echoing Christ's own miracle so precisely it takes the breath away. John 6 verses 12 to 13. Think about that. Leftovers. From a starting point of utter insufficiency. This wasn't efficient rationing. This was lavish, overflowing divine generosity. This reveals the third key insight. God's provision isn't merely sufficient, it's abundant, exceeding our limited requests and expectations. Ephesians 3 verse 20. He doesn't just patch the hole. He rebuilds the structure stronger. He doesn't just quench the thirst. He opens rivers in the desert. Isaiah 43 verse 19. The multiplication wasn't just about feeding bodies that day. It was a tangible, undeniable sign, a sacrament almost, of God's infinite capacity to provide when we align our fragile human action with His boundless divine will through selfless love. What fueled this impossible event? It wasn't Andrea's personal power. He was merely a vessel. It was the convergence of several profound spiritual realities. First, radical faith in God's promise. Andrea truly believed the words of Christ, that those who seek first the kingdom and its righteousness will have what they need added. Matthew 6 verse 33. He staked his actions, his reputation, the well-being of others, on that promise. Second, self-forgetful love. His focus wasn't on his own potential embarrassment or failure if the bread ran out. It was solely on the suffering before him and the command of Christ to love them. His ego was entirely surrendered. Third, obedience in action. He didn't just believe God could provide. He acted as if he already had, distributing the insufficient supply with the confidence of one handling abundance. This act of obedience is crucial. Faith without works, James reminds us, is dead. James 2 verse 17. Andrea's faith was vibrantly alive, in his hands breaking the bread. Fourth, divine power responding to human vulnerability offered in love. God's grace flows most powerfully not through our strength, but through our acknowledged weakness offered to Him. 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9. Andrea's not enough became the perfect conduit for God's more than enough. This miracle wasn't magic. It was divine love responding to radical, trusting, compassionate human action. It was a collision of heaven's economy with earth's scarcity, and heaven won decisively. But the impact rippled far beyond that single distribution line. Part 3. Echoes through time and your invitation to abundance. The shock waves from that day in Naples reverberated instantly. Imagine the awe among the poor who received not just sustenance, but a tangible touch of the divine. Imagine the stunned wonder of Andrea's helpers, handling bread that defied logic. Imagine the hushed whispers spreading through the city. A priest, the poor, baskets that never emptied. It wasn't just a story. It was witnessed, documented, and became a cornerstone of the evidence for Andrea Avellino's profound sanctity. This documented miracle, echoing Christ's own multiplication so clearly, became a beacon, a testament shouting that the God of the Gospels is alive, active, and still moves powerfully through those who surrender to him in radical love and trust. It proved that the age of miracles hadn't passed. It continues wherever faith burns hot and compassion overflows. This is the fourth essential point. Miracles like this are divine confirmations, authenticating God's presence and power, working through his faithful servants. They are signposts pointing back to him, reminders that his arm is not shortened, Isaiah 59 verse 1. They bolster the faith of the entire community, strengthening the belief that God is intimately involved in the gritty realities of human suffering and need. For seniors, perhaps facing doubts or feeling forgotten, this story screams, God sees. He knows your needs, your anxieties, your hidden acts of love. He is not remote. He is Emmanuel, God with us. Matthew 1 verse 23. Working even now, sometimes in the most shocking, hidden ways. But the deepest message of this miracle isn't confined to 16th century Naples, or even just to the literal multiplication of food. Its resonance is timeless and profoundly personal. This is the fifth, and perhaps most crucial point for you right now. The principle of divine multiplication applies to far more than bread. What is the bread in your life that feels scarce? Time, energy, patience, financial resources, hope, love, the capacity to forgive, the strength to face another day of pain or loneliness. St. Andrea's story is a divine blueprint, a shocking secret whispered through the ages. Offer your meager portion to God in faith, especially for the sake of others, and watch him multiply it. Give your last ounce of patience to a difficult situation, acting as if you have an abundance, trusting God to supply the grace, and feel it expand within you. Offer your limited time to listen to someone lonely, trusting God to redeem the time, Ephesians 5 verse 16, and find your own soul refreshed in the process. Give generously from your fixed income to someone in greater need, trusting the promise of Malachi 3 verse 10 and Luke 6 verse 38, and witness unexpected provisions, peace, or simply the profound joy that transcends dollars. Pour out your love even when you feel drained, believing God is the source, 1 John 4 verse 19, and discover a deeper wellspring opening within you. The miracle happens in the giving, in the trusting action. God's mathematics is not subtraction, but multiplication through the paradoxical power of sacrifice and love. When you feel most empty, that is the moment to give, for it forces you to rely utterly on him, opening the channel for his infinite grace to flow. He doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called in the very act of responding. Hebrews 13 verses 20 to 21. So what's your next step? Look around. Where do you see need? Tangible need for food or comfort, or the deeper hunger for connection, understanding, hope? What small, seemingly insufficient resource do you hold? Your listening ear? A few dollars? A prayer? A word of encouragement? A simple act of service? Don't calculate the impossibility. Don't wait until you feel strong or abundantly resourced. Remember St. Andrea Avellino, reaching into the nearly empty basket. Remember the widow's mites. Remember the boy's loaves and fishes. Offer what you have, right now in faith. Break it. Give it. Trust the God who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, Psalm 50 verse 10, who clothes the lilies of the field, and who promises to care for you far more than the sparrows, Matthew 6 verses 26 to 30. Step into the miracle. Act as if he has already provided the abundance, distributing your limited time, energy, love, or resources with the confidence born of his promise. And then, watch, wait, see how he moves. The multiplication may not be as instantly visible as loaves in a basket, though sometimes, shockingly, it is. More often, it's the quiet multiplication of peace displacing anxiety, joy replacing despair, strength renewing weariness, unexpected provision appearing, or simply the profound, unshakable knowledge that you are held, seen, and used by the Almighty. Your faithful act, done in love for Him and His children, becomes the vessel for His miraculous grace. That's the legacy of Saint Andrea Avellino. That's the open invitation to you today. Stop fearing the empty basket. Start distributing in faith. The miracle isn't just history. It's waiting to unfold through your hands, right here, right now. Offer your little. Watch Him make it much. Share below. Where's God calling you to trust Him with your not enough? Let's witness His abundance together. Pass this truth on. Someone desperately needs to hear that their scarcity is God's starting line. And step forward. Your basket awaits. Biography of Saint Andrea Avellino, 1521 to 1608. One early life and calling. Andrea Avellino was born Lancelotto Avellino on August 6, 1521, in Castronuovo, modern-day Basilicata, southern Italy, into a devout but humble family. Gifted with keen intelligence, he was sent to study theology and canon law in Naples, eventually becoming a lawyer in the ecclesiastical court. However, the deeper he became involved in legal disputes, the more he longed for holiness rather than worldly success. 2. A turning point of conversion. After once compromising the truth in defense of a client, Lancelotto was deeply shaken by guilt. In repentance, he abandoned his legal career, returned to seminary, and was ordained a priest in 1545. To mark his new beginning, he took the name Andrea in honor of the martyr Saint Andrew, reminding himself of Christ's words, "Follow me." John 1 verses 38 to 40. 3. Joining the Theatines and Reform Mission in 1556, Father Andrea encountered the Theatine Fathers, a new order dedicated to reforming the clergy in the spirit of the Council of Trent. Inspired by their zeal, he took final vows and joined the community at St. Paul's Monastery in Naples. Devotion to the Eucharist. He became known for keeping long hours in adoration before the Blessed Sacrament, even throughout the night. Parish reform. Appointed superior of the Milan House, 1560 to 1570. He reformed priestly discipline, promoted frequent confession, and established catechism classes for the poor. Model of humility. Despite his learning, he called himself a poor student in the school of Jesus Christ. 4. Miracles and trust in God. Witnesses of his time recorded many extraordinary events. Exorcisms and miraculous healings took place when he prayed over the sick. Supernatural peace. During anti-Spanish riots in Naples, his monastery remained untouched while chaos reigned around. Conversions. Hundreds, including nobles and hardened sinners, returned to God after confessing to Him. 5. Death at the altar on November 10, 1608, while beginning Mass with the words, "In Troibo ad altar Dei." Father Andrea suffered a stroke and collapsed at the altar. He was lifted gently and whispered, "Into your hands, Lord," surrendering his soul at age 87. The people of Naples immediately venerated him as the saint of a holy death, the protector of those who feared sudden death. 6. Canonization. 1624. Beatified by Pope Urban VIII. 1712. Canonized by Pope Clement XI. Feast day, November 10th. Patron saint, against sudden death, strokes, and for priests hearing confessions. 7. Spiritual legacy. St. Andrea Avellino left the Church a timeless example. Ongoing conversion, the courage to radically change course when conscience calls. Eucharistic prayer, treating time before the Blessed Sacrament as life's true source. Peaceful death, teaching us to live prepared, with each day as a gift for loving God. Even today, stroke victims and those facing sudden illness seek his intercession. In Naples, the saying goes, "He who dies in God's grace is the true victor," a phrase forever linked with the name of Saint Andrea. He reminds us that no matter our beginnings, God's grace can turn any life into a miracle of redemption.